and welcome back to Weedy Kids. In today's session we are going to be looking at how to take one of these beauties, gain inspiration from it and try to make our own macrame twine feather hanging.
So to make a macrame feather you're going to need some twine, string or yarn. I've used some natural colours here, but you can use whatever colours you like. Maybe you can make a bird of paradise feather, or you could just simply use whatever you have to hand in your home. A fine tooth comb, scissors, a stick from a handy walk out in the woods somewhere, or you could also use a keyring as an alternative, heavy books for weights, a ruler, and I use thin florist's wire in my feather for more structure, but this is entirely optional and up to you. Start by measuring your stick. Mine was 20 centimetres. I'm actually timesing that by 4 and I'm going to cut myself 80 centimetres of twine out 3 times over. I'm then going to do exactly the same with my florist's wire. Now if you're not doing this step, don't worry, you don't have to. If you are, you're going to need the same amount of florist wire as you are twine, and you are going to be twisting and wrapping, as you can see here, the florist wire around the twine. Keep twisting to make sure that it's nice and tight until all 3 are covered. If not, just skip that step. Next, fold and find the centre point between those 3 pieces of string, and you're going to be wrapping them over your stick. So putting your fingers through and pulling, as you can see here, the rest of the strands through and tightening onto the stick. Next you're going to separate the 6 strands out into 3 sets of 2, so in order to be able to plait them. Make sure you weight down the top with those heavy books, that's what they're for, and start your plaiting. You plait from the outside over the centre one, outside over the centre, outside over the centre, outside over the centre, if you've never done it before. Keep plaiting until you reach the end. As you can see, the wire lends itself to the structure by giving it the opportunity to bend and hold shape where needed. If you're using a keyring, it's a very simple process for you. You need one string that's 80 centimetres long, and you are going to be slotting your string through at the halfway point and looping through and back on itself and pulling tight. Remember to weigh down at the top. Next, weigh down your structure from the top so the stick's nicely heavily covered and weighted, and you can begin. You're going to be collecting your yarn or string twine, that which you're using, and you're just going to check. You're going to need roughly lengths that are approximately 20 centimetres long. When I measured some of mine that I had left over from other projects, they were nearly there, so I decided to use those. Now, the technique. Take your strands and fold them in half. Make sure your ends are together. Now then, slot the folded end underneath your plait. See? Now take a next strand, 20 centimetres, fold in half, keep your ends together, and this time put the loop on the other end. Pinch your fingers through, pull the ends from the one underneath the plait through on top, and push your ends through the loop on the one underneath, and then pull together. See? You can keep them fairly loose so it can move up and down, or you can tighten it so that you can't move it around. Pull nice and tight to make sure they're completed once they get to the top. So let's go through that again. Fold in half, slot underneath. Fold in half with the fold on the other side. Pick up your ends through that second fold and push your new ends through the first fold. Pull tight, loosen to push the top and pull even tighter to continue. You're going to need to do a few of these just to get the hang of it, so let's practice. It soon feels fairly simple and you can move at much more speed. Once you've done a few, have a look at your work. You'll notice that all the knots tend to be on one side if you've been consistent. This isn't how we need it for our feather. We need you to start slotting some of your half-folded twines in the other direction first, pinching through and then pushing through in exactly the same way as before, but on the other side, so that it creates a knot on the opposite side, so it goes from right to left or left to right, all the way down the plait in the centre. Continue with your knotting until you've managed to do about half the length of the plait, at which point feel free to turn it round and weigh down the other end so that it's easier to work with. And then continue with your strands, creating your macrame knots on the left and then on the right all the way down till you've got about 5 centimetres left at the end of your plait. Once you reach the end, remove the heavy weights and just check that there isn't any extra space in which you need to place another knot or two at the end of your now feather. The tip of your feather is also going to need to be as long as those pieces on the side. So as you can measure, I had 6 centimetres and a bit more. So stretch out all of those pieces, mine had wire on obviously, and you're going to need to tie them off. Being as mine had the florist wire on them, it was quite easy for me to unravel and then just wrap that wire around. However, if you've done it without the wire, you can still pull out the strands from the twine or string or yarn and tightly wrap them and tie them tight. So 2 small pieces wrapped around nice and tightly just to tie off all those ends together. If you're using the florist's wire, as you can see here, twist them together, wrap around, and then of course make sure that you cut carefully any of the excess florist wire off. And here we have something that is clearly beginning to resemble something a little bit like a feather. So next step, you're going to be unraveling all of those pieces of twine. Yep, you are. So twist the twine from the top and you'll notice that it opens into a number of other little strands. You separate those with your fingers and pull them apart. If you're working with little people, this might be a task that you want to spread out over a few days. With the tail now unravelled, you need to unravel up both sides too. Here we can see, you pick a strand, you twist it, open up all the different little individual strands inside that within the twine, and just separating those out. It's actually not as bad as it looks. It is quite time consuming, but it can also be quite satisfying once you get to the end. Once you reach the end, you can begin to see how this is looking like a feather. Just stretch down the structure and just untwist any pieces that may be caught up, and have a look at what you've created. Next step, collect that fine-tooth comb and start combing through the individual strands. It's going to remove quite a bit of fluff and anything that is caught in any of the twine. Make sure that you remember to do both sides of the feather. Our next consideration is obviously cutting our feather down to size. You can either do this by hand, freehanding it, or you may also consider using a ruler to help you imagine where that spacing is going to be. Taking your scissors, start snipping. Remember, this may be quite tough to do as the twine is actually quite thick. Remember also to narrow it slightly as you come towards the tip of the feather area. Cut away any excess strands that you may have missed, and remember to check on both sides that all pieces have been cut away, and if not, snip to adjust. Next, you need to consider the curvature around the top of our feathers. In the same way, imagine where that line may be, or mark it out if you'd like to with a felt tip and cut away at the relevant area. Do the same again on the other side. Finally, pay attention to the tips and any straggling ends that may still need a little bit of snipping and touching up. And there we have it. This this is pretty much our beautiful macrame feather complete. Lastly, all we need to consider is how we are going to tie on our loop at the top so that we can attach our wall hanging macrame feather onto something. I've chosen here to use a clove hitch, as you can see, but you can just as easily tie them with ordinary overhand knots. And there we have it, your beautiful natural twine macrame feather that you can hang somewhere in your home or you can gift to a friend. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that we see you again sometime soon. Take care! Bye from Weeby Kids!